What is up, my people? Now, screw having a long intro, let's get straight into the source. This is 3 things I wish I knew before I started Shopify dropshipping, or it could be applicable to any business in general. Now, I want all of these to be high level stuff, so it's not going to be an email marketing strategy you can use to generate 8% more revenue. I want these to be high level stuff that you can apply more broadly to your thinking and the way you're going about starting your business, which should hopefully move the needle a lot more than a tiny little hack on your product page. Now, speaking of needles, that immediately brings us to our first point, which is in general, you should be putting more time, effort, energy, and focus on the big needle movers than these tiny little hacks or whatever that you're trying to get on your product page. Perfect example of this is when I was testing out my first ever product on Shopify back in 2019, which was posture correctors. I couldn't sell a single one with Facebook ads, and I spent hours and hours and hours looking up conversion rate optimization hacks, like what is there something wrong, or should the logo on my checkout page be slightly more to the right. I was so hyper focused on all these tiny details when really I should have been looking at the bigger picture as a whole. While of course, yes, it is beneficial to be hyper focused on conversion rate optimization because you will generate more revenue doing that. It's just not going to move the needle as much as something like testing out a new product entirely. I spent many weeks trying to micro optimize the posture corrector, everywhere from trying to increase the click-through rate of the ads or make the product page a little bit more attractive. And in the end, I never generated a single sale from it, so it was all completely pointless. And if I'd spent my time, if I'd just cut that way quicker and focus for what's going to move the needle more, me micro optimizing this page that's getting no revenue, or testing out an entirely new product that could blow up and make 6 figures. It's just allocating your time wisely to the big needle movers is a very important thing to do. Now, I'm going to repeat that because it's so important, and it goes for any stage of business you're at, including where I am now. You have to manage your time properly and focus on the big needle movers. It's really important, and that literally involves sitting down. I have a to-do list every day. I'll literally sit down and then I'll look at like half the things on there and I'll be like, that's going to take me ages and it's probably not even going to be that beneficial. And there's 1 or 2 things on there, usually the most annoying things that you need to do, that actually move the needle. So I would recommend consciously sitting down and looking at the actions, looking at your to-do list and just filtering them out by what's going to move the needle the most. And the annoying thing is the hardest things are the one that's going to move the needle the most. It's way harder to like start testing a new product and make a whole new range of ads rather than like micro optimize a product page that already exists. And that's life, man. Like the hardest things are always the most worthwhile. So that is rule number 1, focus on the big needle movers. On to number 2. Rule number 2 is don't blindly trust or listen to the advice of anyone you see online.
And that also includes me.
Do you know what the prerequisites are for starting a YouTube channel and teaching about business? The only thing you need is an internet connection. Now, let me tell you something, bruv. I've seen fat personal trainers. I've seen a homeless guy with an Apple Mac laptop plugged into the socket outside a shop, charging it. And you know what I've also seen? I've seen YouTube business gurus who don't have businesses. Just because someone seems confident and like they know what they're talking about and they have a lot of subscribers and they can explain a tutorial video of how to set up a Shopify product page, it honestly doesn't mean they know anything about actual business. I feel like the space is a lot better now than it was in 2019 when I started, but there were multiple YouTubers I was taking advice from that, I'm not joking, literally eventually got called out by CoffeeZilla for being complete scams. This was back in the day when CoffeeZilla was like tiny. He had like a few tens of thousands of subscribers and I was watching him, and now he's uncovering billion-pound frauds, but back then he was uncovering like shifty YouTubers trying to sell their Shopify dropshipping course. Believe me when I say it's so much easier to just repackage someone else's YouTube video into your own channel than it is to actually start a successful e-commerce store. Way easier. So it stands to reason that there'd be more people doing that than actual e-commerce. So yeah, that is lesson number 2. Be really careful who you take advice from. I used to listen to advice from loads of scammers back when I was learning, and that was a big barrier for me to eventually becoming successful. I spent months just going down wrong avenues, listening to wrong advice, building wrong stores, testing wrong products with wrong methods. And yeah, it was a complete waste of time. I think a fantastic rule of thumb for this type of thing is if they're not sharing their brand to the public, if their brand is like hidden, then have to take it with a grain of salt. And that's why I'm open about my brand lovyprints.com and why I've got a business vlog, which is, it's just proof that at least I'm doing the stuff that I'm teaching, you know, because otherwise you can't ever know. I'm going to call out some names just because I'm a tiny YouTuber and no one watches these anyway, and I think it's helpful. So like Davey Fogarty is a great example of someone who's teaching e-commerce and he does it himself, like he owns the brand Udi, which is enormously fantastic. And then also the best e-commerce podcast I've ever seen is the Midnight Podcast by Matthew Kelly, and he's running the brand Dream Dust or Rainbow Dust, Space Goods, that's the one. Dream Dust is his product. Yeah, he's running the brand Space Goods, and yeah, he's running it in real time as he's talking about e-commerce. So it's fantastic. Those are two great names. And on the other end, there's someone like the Econ King, who's got the biggest following by far out of any of these people. And I don't know, it just gives very generic advice and you have no idea what his brands are, what numbers he's doing. So lucky I'm small, so no one's ever going to listen to this. Hope it doesn't get me into trouble when I've got 20 million subscribers, but we'll see. So that is lesson number 2. Just be really careful about who you're taking advice from. And I think a good rule of thumb is, are they happy to share their real brand? Are they building a brand in real time whilst teaching it? I think that's a great rule of thumb. So that's lesson number 2. On to number 3. Now, this last lesson is a bit more specific and isn't as high level, but it was so important for me that I think it's worth saying. And that is, if you're just starting out, you want to make a niche store. You don't want to make a one product store, because especially if you're starting out, it's just simply not going to work. So you're investing all that time into one store, and 99 times out of 100, like, you're not going to hit the jackpot on your first try. So that is out the window. And with a general store, they're so vague and people are less like trustworthy now of random websites. It's just not branded enough and just doesn't have a good enough feel to it and a good conversion rate. And yeah, it just leaves you all over the place with a general store. Now, I'm not saying that a general store or one product store can't work. They 100% can work. Just in my experience, it's going to be harder than setting up like a branded looking niche store. So it could be, and it can be a very broad niche, something like home or kids or pets, like something super broad like that. It's just going to be easier. You can brand it better. You can learn how to make a nicer looking site better. And there's still like an unlimited amount of products you can test in a niche that broad, like truly unlimited. The amount of things on AliExpress is off the scale. And yeah, you can just stick with that one store until you find something that works. Because believe me, if you pick a broader niche like that, there is a product in that niche somewhere that you can blow up. It's there. All you do have to do is find it. So that would be my last piece of advice, is to pick a niche store and just stick with it until you find that one winner that pops. I had a look at my notes. I've also got one more bonus tip, which was something I did really well, which I've seen, like from personal experience, seen people struggle with and make massive mistakes with. And that is, you really have to track your profit and not get wide-eyed at high revenue numbers if you're not actually making money. Yeah, so I've known people in my personal life who have scaled brands to massive numbers, but they have never actually looked at or maybe they haven't wanted to look at the bottom line profit because they know they're not going to like what they see. And yeah, that's an unfortunate reality of life. Like, the truth always catches up with you in the end anyway, so you might as well bear the pain of it now. Just know your break-even return on ad spend numbers and just keep track. Like, I just have an app which I paid $20 a month that keeps track of my daily profit. If you don't even want to spend that much, it's pretty easy to do it manually if you're not doing high numbers. So yeah, just keep a eagle eye, a very perceptive eagle eye on your bottom line profit, because that's what it's all about in the end. Who cares about revenue? Like, it's all about take-home money. And that is everything. Number 1, focus on the big needle movers. Number 2, be careful who you take advice from. And number 3, if you're just starting out, please build a niche store and just stick with it. With bonus tip number 4, know how much money you're making and don't get swept away by revenue numbers, especially if you're at a loss. And that is absolutely everything. No long outro. Don't want to waste your time. Thanks for watching.